Good afternoon and welcome to the 2021 Society for Values in Higher Education Winter Mini Meeting. We are just delighted to have our audience joining us, and we're very much looking forward to the conversation we have this afternoon with New York University President Emeritus, Dr. John Sexton. My name is Dr. Melanie Howard, and I am the president of the Society for Values in Higher Education. We're joined this afternoon by my co-host, Dr. Eric Fain-Selvo, who will be introducing himself and our guest in just another moment. Now, for audience members who might be unfamiliar with the Society for Values in Higher Education, let me provide just a brief introduction to the organization and to our current programming, including this week's events that you are attending here. SVHE is a nearly century-old organization that, since its founding, has been committed to advancing values such as integrity, diversity, social justice, civic responsibility, etc., within higher education. And during this 2021 year, the organization's programming is exploring the topic, "Can we talk? The university's role in public discourse." Now, this programming is taking place in a variety of ways, both this week in our winter mini meeting, which you're a part of here, as well as later this year in our annual summer meeting in July. And we hope that you'll be able to join us for that event as well. As a part of this year's programming, we have been hosting a series of events called Chats with Change Agents. And these chats are designed to open space for conversations with key leaders in higher education who are given the opportunity to speak to the pressing issues that are facing us today. And so today, as we are opening this winter mini meeting with this plenary event, we're delighted to have Dr. John Sexton joining us to talk about his book, Standing for Reason: The University in a Dogmatic Age, as well as other issues that are facing higher education today. And so with that, let me go ahead and turn the floor back over to my co-host, Dr. Eric Fain-Selvo, who will introduce himself and our guest. Eric, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Melanie. Hi, everybody. I'm Eric Fain-Selvo. I'm Dean of the School of Humanities and Social Sciences at Indiana University, Kokomo. So I'm coming to you from the frozen tundra at this moment. And I'm also executive director of the Society for Values in Higher Education. And so I'm delighted to be here. And I'll say just a few words about our guest before launching into the discussion of his book. For those who don't know John Sexton is Professor Emeritus of New York University, Dean Emeritus of the NYU Law School, and the Benjamin Butler Professor of Law at NYU. He joined the law school faculty in 1981, was named the school's dean in 1988, and he served in that capacity for 14 years. He was named the university's president in 2001 and served in that capacity until January 1st, 2016. And he has returned to teaching. Well, he's continually taught through all that time. Dr. Sexton received a BA in history, an MA in comparative religion, and a PhD in the history of American religion, all from Fordham University. And he holds a law degree from Harvard Law School. Dr. Sexton has had an incredibly distinguished career in the legal profession, in civic life, and in higher education. His list of contributions is too long, really, for us to go into here, as is his list of awards and honors. I would encourage you to Google him. He's a prolific author. Among his books are Redefining the Supreme Court's Role, A Theory of Managing the Federal Court System, Baseball as a Road to God, Seeing Beyond the Game, and the very more recent, Standing for Reason: The University in a Dogmatic Age. And that'll be, despite my love for baseball, that the latter will be the focus of our conversation today. And so I wanted to get us started with a softball question, but one that I think would be helpful for the audience, some of whom may have read the book, some of whom may not. John, could you just tell us a bit about what prompted you to write the book? What were the problems or issues that you saw in American culture, that you saw on university campuses, that you just thought, you know, I need to write and try to address these?
Well, first of all, thank you to you, Eric, and thank you to Melanie, and thank you for those that are in attendance. It's wonderful to have a chance to talk with folks like you about ideas. Let me give you two cuts in an answer to that question. So 14 years ago, in January 2007, my life and the life of our family changed very suddenly. I was in this room doing some writing, and about 6:45 on a Sunday evening went down to ask Lisa, my wife, if she wanted me to get dinner yet. We'd had a wonderful day together. Our kids had checked in. And she said, "I'm reading something I want to talk to you about at dinner. Come back in half an hour." And when I came back, she was gone. It was one of these aneurysms. There's no warning. She wasn't sick. She was 10 years younger than me. And I had no sense of whether or not I'd be able to live, frankly, without her. We had been more in love every day for more than 3 decades at that point. And I certainly didn't know whether I could continue as president at NYU. The community and family rallied around me, and I was more or less back on my feet in a few weeks. At that point, I had told the trustees I would not stay as president past 2012, and I had begun creating the next stage of my life, which was going to be the creation of a free private high school in Brooklyn, built on the principles of the Jesuit education I had received, which would be available only for people we discovered in the nooks and crannies of Brooklyn who had failed to be accepted by the elite public and privates of New York. And our idea, and I'd recruited a team of people to work with me. I'd begun the fundraising, because if you're going to start a high school in 2012, you've got to be ramping up. By the time I finished moving out of the initial shock, I realized that was too much about my life before Lisa, which had been defined meaningfully by teaching high school and having a great high school teacher, the greatest teacher I've ever encountered. And I wanted to do something that honored her values as well as mine. And a notion of a particular version of university, of which NYU could be an instantation, had begun to develop. We were far along with the beginning of NYU Abu Dhabi, which was the only thing that I did at NYU that she thought was worthy. She thought it was nice that I could enjoy the law school and teaching law and the university, and she was happy for me. But the thing that hit her value system most, because she lived a very a professional life as well as a personal life that was committed to bridging across difference and empowering those without voice. She did it all anonymously. She believed in the doctrine of tzedakah. She's Jewish. I'm Catholic. So it seemed that building this concept of NYU would be a good idea. So that's kind of part one of the answer to your question. Part two is she had done, if you want to get a sense of her handiwork, there's a great Bill Moyers public television series, 6 hours, I think, maybe 8, called Genesis with Bill Moyers. That was Lisa's idea, and she had written the study guide for it. Her name is not even in a footnote. She put Bill's name on the cover. She wrote every word, as he would say. And it brought together public intellectuals from the 3 religions of Abraham to talk about the common stories. And that's an example of the kind of things that she would do. And Bill and Judith Moyers were a couple friends of ours, and Bill called me and said, I want to do a show about this course you're teaching, Baseball as a Road to God. He had sat in, and other friends, Doris Goodwin, Tom Oliphant, had sat in, and they had observed something going on in that class with the students. And Bill said, when you come on, I'm going to ask you about how you're processing Lisa's death. So be prepared. I think it's important. And more or less because of that show, I was then public. I'd always been very conscious of the fact that although I'm a spiritual person and a practicing Catholic, at least by some definitions, by Pope Francis and Pope John's definition, maybe not Benedict's, I'd been conscious of the fact that as the head of a secular university, at which, among the cognoscenti, religion was not seen as something one indulged with a lot of attention. But now I was public with that. And Ronnie Dworkin, my great colleague at the law school, an icon at the New York Review of Books, gave me a beautiful blurb for the back of the book. We had done many, he was a Red Sox fan, I'm a Yankee fan. We had done many games together. So that kind of laid out, and I have to tell you that that book came out somewhere around 2011 by the time I finished it, and it became a Times bestseller. To this day, every month I get 2 or 3 emails from clergy who've done sermons out of it, whatever. So as I came to stepping down as president, because I revised the date from 2012, in 2009, I told the trustees that the farthest out I would go would be January 1st, 2016. Because by then I knew that this notion that we were beginning to develop, that had developed out of the seeds of this decision to do something that resonated with Lisa's values, the notion of what I call an ecumenical university, but using ecumenical here in a secular sense, not a theological sense. That was well underway. Abu Dhabi had opened up in 2010. Shanghai opened up 2 or 3 years later. The global network began to come together as the ecumenical circulatory system. I'm using language that we may want to unpack later. But the point is this notion was flowered, and there's a certain biblical resonance to, or sabbatical resonance to 14 years. So I told them 14 years as dean, 14 years as president. I had done 14 years as a high school teacher. This seems to be good. I want to move on to the next stage of my life, go back to the faculty, have more time with my students, more time with writing. So, but I wanted to put on offer, not an explanation of NYU. I mean, NYU is an illustration, a powerful illustration in the book. But I wanted to put on offer a certain view of the university. I'm going to call that for the moment until we unpack it if you want. This ecumenical university in a secular sense, which was, in fact, I wanted to present, why had I viewed this a useful life? Why had, because all we do as deans and presidents, at least in my view, is we don't direct with a heavy hand, we put things on offer. And I had put this on offer to NYU, and there'd been an overwhelming response, especially in fact, the better people responded more enthusiastically. The Nobel Prize winners, the National Science funded folks. It was really quite heartening. I wanted to put an explanation on it because I'm not one for keeping records. I knew I wasn't going to write a memoir, but I wanted the case for this to be out there so others that chose to could take up an offer to do it. And I saw suddenly as I began to write, because sometimes you're not conscious why you're passionate and driven towards something, but I saw then a phenomenon, and I know I'm giving a long answer here, but if you just, this last piece, if you don't mind, is one story. So I early in the book, I think I tell this story, maybe it's even in the preface. And in 1956, in a classroom in Brooklyn at this great Jesuit high school, Daniel Berrigan, Daniel Berrigan, for those that are too young, was a Jesuit priest who it's not an overstatement to say was the Martin Luther King of the peace movement in some ways. I mean, but in 1956, it's 10 years before that, when he was part of the Catonsville Nine and so forth. He's the leader, really, with his brother Philip. 1956, he's my religion teacher, and he's teaching religion in a classroom in Brooklyn, and he writes on the blackboard 4 Latin words: extra ecclesia nulla salus. Outside the church, there's no salvation. This is before the Vatican Council. This is before Kennedy's elected president. You know, this is the height of Irish Catholic triumphalism. And I went up to Danny Berrigan and I said, Father Berrigan, does that mean my best friend Jerry Epstein? You know, I've been the Shabbos Goy for his family. He can't go to heaven. And Danny Berrigan said to me, if you don't baptize him, he won't go to heaven. It was 1956. 2016, I'm in a meeting in the United Arab Emirates with faith leaders from 25 faiths having an ecumenical dialogue. So that arc of 60 years. Meanwhile, in 1956, my father was the head of the Jefferson Democratic Club in Brooklyn. And he worked with everybody to get the snow removed and the garbage and safety and schooling and so forth and so on. And some of his best friends were what were called Republicans, you know. Even with his Harry Truman tie, he would talk to. And I began to notice that over that 60-year period, we had moved as a matter of at least American, and now of course worldwide, but American political discourse from that kind of natural ecumenism in a secular sense to a dogmatism in a secular sense that is more virulent and more impregnable. I mean, sure, Jerry Epstein and I couldn't talk about the virgin birth, but now political views are revealed, not reasoned to. We go to our biblical sources, whether it be Fox or MSNBC or whatever, to be reinforced. And just as my directions theologically in 1956 came from Rome, so also in a secular sense, our directions come. And there's this extraordinary dogmatism there. And one piece of data I found was fascinating. In 1956, 3% of Americans said they would be upset if somebody from their family married somebody from the other political party. Today, that number's 40%. More than race, more than religion. You know, and so I was struck by this, the arc. And of course, it made me optimistic, because if we can discover in theology the kind of movement towards ecumenism we've seen, it should be possible to do it through secular conversation, to overcome this secular dogmatism. And of course, my experience, going back to my high school teaching, which was 15 years working in the world of competitive debate, where you don't know which side of the issue you're on until the coin is flipped, and you have to prepare, you have to live in the gray, gave me some optimism. So it's the second book was kind of the equivalent, that's why I tell you the whole story, of the spiritual revelation. This is my professional, the kind of ratio studiorum or apologia provida sua of my professional life here. And there really is a connection between the two in a kind of allergy to triumphalism and certainty. And so I view them as bookend projects, both as a testament to Lisa.
John, thank you so much for that.
I'm sorry to have gone so long, but
No, it was a delight to listen to this. I know there are several anecdotes that you were telling here that also appeared in the book, and it just brings them so much more to life to hear you narrate these things. Thank you so much for that. And I'm impressed too by the ways in which I really hear in your answer this integration of your spiritual journey, your professional journey, your personal journey, all of these very much weave together in a way that it seems for you personally is modeling this kind of ecumenism that you're talking about. And so I'd be interested in digging a little bit more into this idea of ecumenism. You know, you mentioned that you really see universities as having the opportunity to serve as incubators for this sort of secular ecumenism. And so I wonder if we can ask you to say a bit more about that. How can universities do that? What are the ways that they can foster the sort of attitudes and questions and life of the mind and body and soul that are going to lead to this sort of secular ecumenism to which you're calling higher education?
So it won't surprise you that the first point I have to make is that one of the great wonders, especially of American higher education, is its enormous diversity of institutional forms. So I was the chair of the American Council on Education with all 5,000 members, you know, from community colleges to research universities. And there's to me no priority. There's a question of mission and the difference in mission. And I'm still very involved in trying to keep a couple of faith-based places, such as St. Francis College in Brooklyn, where I was chairman of the religion department before I went to law school. So it's very important that my argument not be heard as saying this is either the best or the one form. Okay, I don't want to be translated into a triumphalist here. On the other hand, so that's why the argument is a four-part argument. The first part of the argument is an observation about the state of American political discourse. Mm-hmm. And it ends by pointing to a set of features about colleges and universities that are potential antidotes to the allergy to nuance and complexity that we find in the political realm, such that all of us who care about ideas in our world, the world of colleges and universities, we want to put them out. We want to, whether it be in a journal or in a talk like this, we delight in putting out our ideas and getting the reaction of others who don't view them as something to be attacked or embraced, but view them as something to be considered and perhaps built upon. And of course, it's all the progress of knowledge, which is our business, is all intergenerational, and we have all kinds of institutional forms that are designed to do that. So then the back three elements of the argument are, first of all, the traditional college. And I'll be quick here, Melanie, because I spoke too long the first time, but you can unpack it as you want. In the traditional college or university, the core element that must be preserved is that there be genuine dialogic dialogue. Mm-hmm. And I offer at the beginning of that part of the argument the template that's used in competitive debate, and the fact that a champion debater, and for those 15 years I worked with high school students, all young women I should add, they were national champions 5 times, and the key to being a champion debater is being a good listener. Because as the debate goes on, you can't simply repeat your talking points. There are 4 iterations in a competitive debate. And you must have heard what your opposition said, and you must respond to it. It's called extending. Mm-hmm. We would call it deepening the argument. And that is kind of the institutional model. And I present a view, which is an eccentric view, I did my doctoral dissertation on Charles Eliot, who invented the bully pulpit. But my own view is that the job of a dean or a president of a university, the leader of an educational institution, is to be sure that real discourse is occurring and to work to include voices that aren't being heard. So that's the traditional university. Then in the third part, I talk about this ecumenical university, the clearest example of which so far is the NYU of today. And if you look within NYU, which is entirely a circulatory system around 6 continents, actually, literally a circulatory system, not branch campuses. But the kind of quintessential statement is NYU Abu Dhabi, which is by a considerable margin the most diverse student body in the world. I think 144 countries represented there now, and out of scouting teams out to find, and brilliant, absolutely brilliant. Could be, those students could be admitted anywhere, but they choose to come because of the cosmopolitan nature of and they come from every sector of society. Some of them have never been on a plane before they come in. And then the final chapter, which ties it all together, but is important as a public policy matter, very important today, is how do you provide, if you want an ecumenical university, you have to make sure to quote Hamilton, that everybody's in the room, because it makes a difference who's in the room, because the people outside the room don't know what happened because they weren't in the room, right? And that's where real aggressive efforts to create inclusion and the ability of students to finance the education that is matched to them. And the to them is important there, because some students should be in the brass section, some in the violin section, some in the percussion section. Some shouldn't go to college at all, okay? I come from a family where the majority of people have not gone to college, but they've lived joyful and fulfilling lives. So anyway, there's a set of very specific answers to your question, but I shouldn't get too far into the weeds unless you lead me there.
Well, actually, John, let me go back to the what I think was the second part of the argument, thinking about the university, and I'll just share a passage with the audience just so that they can kind of get a feel for this. So this is from page 16. You say, this culture of devalued thought requires a cure. Universities must provide the antidote. They must stand as witnesses for their core values and act as a reproach to dogmatism and its consequences. They must extend their most salient internal activity, the meaningful testing of ideas, as a model for wider public discourse. Simply put, they are our best hope for reversing the ominous trends permeating our society. So I agree, love it, I'm all for it. But in this potential, who knows where this conversation goes? This may be the bleakest question. So this book was published in 2019. A lot has happened since then. I can imagine a sort of two-pronged sort of question. On the one hand, it could be, you know what, that polarization you talk about, that secular dogmatism, we're too far gone. Even in an ideal sense, the university now is not going to be able to help address that. Maybe something else culturally other has to happen, but we're too far down that road now. And the other prong of the question, and you can pick which one or both, is we don't even have that ideal situation, because later you talk about the kind of vicious circle of defunding of public higher education and public skepticism, right? And so we don't even have that ideal of the university. We're in potentially this vicious spiraling circle. And so even if the university could address the political polarization and the secular dogmatism, it's too much of a mess now, right? We're going the wrong direction. And so I said this would be bleak, right? Like, you know, how would you and I'm not sure I believe any of that, but how would you respond to a person who has that more dystopic sense of where all this is heading, both in terms of American culture as well as the university?
Well, first, I'd say, Eric, that, on a Bleak scale of 10 that I see, you were like a 5.5 there. You weren't as bleak as you could have been. I don't do book tours, but I've done. I love sitting at my desk and doing radio around the nation, and I've done a lot since the book has come out on this. So you're kind of mildly bleak there.
I appreciate that.
If you had come with the full force of 10, I still would be giving you the first part of my answer. So after I lay out my argument, there's a conclusion which is entitled "Being Worthy of Lisa." And it says, people maybe think that I'm naive, that this job can be done at all. But, I see this as a version of Pascal's wager. If you don't try, you're not going to do it. That's for sure. Okay. And her life was about trying the impossible. And it's interesting because I'm now, I can't convince you how I got 2 emails so far today, one from one of the most distinguished faculty members in the world, the other from a young administrator who was at NYU doing admissions as we built the global network. He's now running admissions at Temple. And both of them this morning, said, we are so proud to be a part, in the case of the professor, or to have been a part of this solution. And the fellow at Temple said, every time somebody tells me they can't do something, I say, try absorbing an engineering school and starting a campus in Abu Dhabi and Shanghai in the same, 5-year period. So if we don't try, we're not going to do it. So I go beyond being Don Quixote. I'm Graham Greene's Monsignor Quixote, and so that's the first part. And does that mean we'll succeed? No, but it means that we should try and give it our best. Now, as to the kind of death spiral that you described, there is a real danger that there's you see this radical defunding of education, and it's not simply, you talked about public. In public, it's quite visible. We can look at it and see, but it's also in private. I mean, I think the one thing we can be sure of, this is part of the faculty not knowing what's going on outside the cave. You have this, the public is being taught that ideas don't matter. The public is being taught that education doesn't matter. And from all different angles, not just from one angle at all, from all different angles. And that, of course, then feeds into not only public expenditures on higher education, but also private expenditures on higher education. And I sat down with my 2 twin granddaughters night before last, because we were beginning to talk about their juniors, their college choices. And I said, the one thing I don't want you to be doing is I don't want you to be bought down, because there's a whole phenomenon inside our sector of places trying to buy students at the next level by deep discounting, not based upon need, but based upon some SAT score or grade point average or something like that. And it's very destructive. And where it hits the hardest is among the students from underrepresented groups, because they're more price sensitive than anybody else, and they have less information that it makes a difference where you go to school. And that is behind what Bill Bowen pointed out, with the tremendous undermatching of students from the lowest socioeconomic groups. They go to schools that are far less good than the schools they should go to for a whole complex set of reasons. And that's very dangerous. And that comes from what you talked about. The other 3 points of bleakness that frequently is added is there's a certain amount of intentionality in that death spiral. I mean, there are those in our society who see gain for themselves in a set of diseases to the social order that can come under the word distrust. Distrust ideas, distrust the government, distrust institutions. People that gain from low turnout elections, for example. Okay, the idea that they care if their actions cause people to distrust government more, they don't care. They want people to distrust government more. It ends up being, and there, that intentionality reveals itself in our sector with a critique that our universities and colleges, the ones in which we live, so we know, okay, are nothing but political organs designed to indoctrinate in, essentially, this critique would say, a liberal left ethos, which is counterfactual. Okay, it's counterfactual. I mean, you cannot be in a faculty meeting at the NYU Law School, and I now have, since the last 5 years, I've returned to the faculty. I never speak at the faculty meetings, but I sit there and I see the results of this, you know, and the ideological spread of the faculty at NYU Law School, which is, by the way, the most cited and has been for the last 3 or 4 years, the most cited law faculty in the world. Okay, so these are serious scholars. Their ideological spread is broader than the Supreme Court's. And to listen to the way ideas are taken seriously and there's conversation, it's really pretty cool. So, you know, the idea and the polling data, which I have in the book, is quite revelatory to most people. I mean, the fact that that liberal faculty members, 56% of liberal faculty members say that they're happy with the state of their campus. 66% of conservatives say they're happy. And if you look at the data, self-described, liberal, conservative, moderate, and you compare 1984 with today, then 40% liberal. Now, 40% liberal. There's been a drop off in conservatives and a growth in moderates, but this belies but there's a cottage industries out there. It's like the people now that are advancing the fact that there's a cancel culture, even as they have big loud megaphones announcing cancellation is occurring. I am being canceled. I am here telling you very loudly, I am being canceled. So, I mean, we have to be aware of these anti-intellectual movements because there's a real intentionality to it. And of course, it breeds something very, very dangerous, which is the dislocation of governance from ideas.
John, you're saying some things that are sparking ideas, not only for Eric and for me, but also for our attendees. And so we've already had our first question come in the Q&A. And so we'll go ahead and turn to that. We'll also invite other audience members who have questions to submit those via the Q&A function. We'll try to get to as many as we can and hope that you'll understand if we run out of time before we get to all of them. But John, this question, I'm going to read it verbatim as it came through. The asker says, there is a saying that things have to get worse before they can get better. With 2020 being a bender of a year, it can be argued that the world is more divided than it has ever been before. What are the ways that you think we can get back to trusting one another and keeping the discussion open and civil about sensitive topics where many people are on opposite sides? Is it too late or are we running out of time? John, would love to hear some of your reflections in answer to our audience members' question here.
Yeah. So it's not too late, but we are running out of time. I'm not being apocalyptic here, but it's kind of like climate change. The questioner hits the key word, of course, which is trust. Trust. And, you know, it's really interesting because the law school deans meet, all 200 of them for 3 days in January, and not this past January, but a year ago, the book had just come out, and I was a law school dean, so they had me come back, and they did the opening panel was 3 hours, and I did about a half an hour, and then there was an hour and a half of questions. About an hour and a half in, I said to them, I'm pretty proud of elements of this book, but every single one of your questions has occurred on the second part of my argument, which is this part about the traditional university and dialogue, which this question raises too. And I said, that's because you folks are living in that space now. But I said to them, I'm surprised law school deans are asking it, because law schools, I teach my law students that as they read Supreme Court precedents, for example, they're going to find that they don't yield mathematical precision. You can't say the words "no state shall deprive a person of life, liberty, or property without due process of law," that the due process clause yields mathematical precision. In a system of precedent, we get clarity, but every clear point raises 5 questions. So I give them the analogy of a boat going down a river, and there are different currents. It makes a difference whether you're in the Kagan current or the Kavanaugh current, but you're within the boundaries of the river. Go outside those boundaries the way, for example, Robert Bork did by saying the 14th Amendment didn't incorporate certain basic rights against the states, then you're out of the river. And at the bow of the boat, there are tough questions. Behind the boat, there's a lot of clarity. But you have to learn to live with that ambiguity, live in the gray. Now, that's what we do inside universities. The one thing I think I say that's relevant both to the question and to this more general proposition about the traditional university is on most of our campuses, there's a very, very important, tense conversation going on in around whether or not those of us that have been privileged with voice hear those that have not had it. And in those conversations, one thing that I notice is the tremendous trust, to come back to the word that the questioner is, the tremendous trust that those who have been without voice treat us who've had it. Because they say to us, when you do this, A, B, C, D, you hurt me. Now, when they're doing that, they're weaponizing us because they've now given us 4 things we can do to hurt them. And what we've got to learn is this response. This is the analogy to debate again, of being what my colleague Carol Gilligan calls radical listeners. We have to be aggressive listeners. We have to learn. The response can't be, well, wait a minute, did I ever tell you I marched with, Danny Berrigan was my friend, what? Yeah, we can't get there. What we've got to do is we've got to understand, as a good debater would understand, that just because you say something that you intend to convey something to your audience, it's not the audience's obligation to understand it the way you want it. You got to understand where they are. And I think the most important thing in building trust is going to be those of us who have been privileged. And look, we're complex beings. We're not just about race or gender or whatever. So but we have to get into, and by the way, this is where the analogy to ecumenism comes in for me. Raimundo Panicart talked about dialogic dialogue. That the wonder of an ecumenical dialogue theologically is putting yourself in the eyes of the other person and seeing the world that way, not giving up your faith position. And then if you can go beyond that to say, as the poet says, if we could only see ourselves as others see us, how do they see me? And what does that say of me as a victim of original sin, metaphorically? I don't care if you accept the doctrine or not, but metaphorically, we ain't perfect, right? And that's tremendously liberating if we can hear the exercise of those who are in dialogue with us who have not been empowered as being, they're trusting us. Now we have to trust them instead of reacting defensively and seeing what they're doing as an attack. We have to listen. We have to go 80%. We have to do in a good love affair. So I think very slowly and very gradually. Now, I believe we're at a moment in the American political dialogue where we have a shot, because we have two very palpable, measurable crises in hand, both the COVID and the economy. And we have a man, whether you think that he was the answer or not, it's hard to contest this is a good human being. Now, he may be a 90-watt bulb or a 50-watt bulb. Okay, he may have the wrong, but he's a good man. So we have these two things. Now, if we can begin to mobilize, and it's very interesting to me that on this bill that President Biden is pushing, the latest polling is 66% of Americans favor it, 28% oppose it. So, is that a way to begin to build trust? Because if the solution comes to those two problems, it will be an institutional solution. And we've lost faith in all of our institutions, including our universities. We long ago lost it in our government, and then our churches and synagogues went, and business, and so forth. And for a while, only the military. But we've got to think of this, not to mix metaphors with my Pascal's wages, but we have to be like Archimedes and just find a spot to stand and build slowly.
I wanted to follow up with connecting a couple of threads here, and actually the work of, I don't know if you know her, a couple months ago I had a chance to interview Kathleen Fitzpatrick, who wrote a book called Generous Thinking, and one of the things she argues, which I think overlaps a lot with what you're getting at, is the way in which the universities become very isolated from the general population, right? And students come to the universities to get a credential, to then get a job. But, I think I just very much appreciate in the book this sort of spirited defense of the university as an intellectual space that you make. And I think those of us who have sort of embraced it as our life, right? I mean, with that's part of what sucks us in. And so she very much sees that one way of addressing that isolation is for universities to go out and engage the community again, right? So that even if in an ideal world, look, we get more students to come through the university, they have this experience of the intellectual life, and that changes how they then function politically later. We also need to do a more direct engagement with the community. Do you have, like, how do we take what it is that we value as intellectual dialogue and somehow engage the broader community in that way that starts to break down those barriers, so that the public then becomes an ally to us instead of a consumer?
I don't know if what I'm going to say is very New York and NYU centric, but the notion of the university being isolated from the community is just so foreign to my experience. In a month, I'm going to be announcing, in partnership with the New York Public Library, a new nonprofit that I've created, which is competitive debate for senior citizens. The neurological benefits are extraordinary, but it's part of advancing civic discourse, because there'll be a topic for 4 months, and 3 months will be preparation. 1 month will be the debates. And then during the 3 months, you don't know which side of the argument you're going to be on when you get to your debate, right? So you have to prepare and see the gray and the complexities of it and so on. But more important than that, it's going to be driven by volunteers from the NYU and Cornell debating teams. So it's, I mean, the NYU dental students run dental vans that are out in the community. I could give you example after example, and I don't think NYU is unique in this. So I think it's, you know, we create a model sometimes of detachment when there isn't really detachment. I mean, very few of the legal scholars at NYU Law School, which is, as I say, theoretically, they're the ones that are quoted most. They're out in the world. I mean, they were running the defense of the election system. Bob Bauer is an NYU Law School faculty member. The Brennan Center for Justice is one of the, which is a bridge between the, and I don't think NYU is unique in this regard. So that's the first thing I would say. I mean, Northeastern is an example that's really incorporated experiential learning, for example, into its curriculum. And I think most of our places do that. Now that having been said, what we have to do, I think, is be more embracive of that story and more open. I think that what we've gone through this past year, for example, is going to lead to transformations. I couldn't be doing this with you today, and most of your participants couldn't be involved, but for the fact that we've now all become very good and comfortable with this kind of format. And that doesn't mean, I mean, I, for 12 years, got on a plane on Friday night and flew for 14 hours to Abu Dhabi, got there Saturday night with the time change, taught my 2 classes on Sunday, and got on a plane on Sunday night and was back in my office Monday morning. That's how strongly I feel about in-person education, right? I'm going to continue to do that selectively. But this past semester, I had to teach. I told them Sunday's the first day of the week there. I told the registrar, put my Abu Dhabi class at the normal time, 1 p.m. Sunday, which he did. And it wasn't until the first class that I realized that was 4 a.m. Sunday morning for me here in New York. And my kids and grandkids said, Grandpa, Dad, how can you get up at 3:30 to teach class? I said, well, I've always been teaching at 3:30. It's just I flew there, so the clock said 1 p.m. But this is a lot easier. But now I know I can have people into the class, you know, who might not otherwise be able to come. And so I think there are going to be a lot of tools at our disposal, but disconnection from the world is not one of the things that I see as a major obstacle to overcome.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a great point. That we've on our campus, it was a small effort, but I think an important one, where last semester we had a few faculty who opened up their classes through Zoom to alumni, people in the community, whatever, and because those particular class sessions were either talking about the pandemic, racial justice, or the presidential election, and the feedback that we got was really quite positive, and it was. So I was one of the faculty who participated in it. It was just nice to share what we were doing in the classroom with people outside the classroom, right?
So look, Eric, I never thought of it quite this way until you said what you just said. Look what's possible. Mm-hmm. So we no longer have the canonical deliverer of the news the way Walter Cronkite was. Right, that doesn't bind, and that was maybe an oversimplified view. Diversity generally is a good thing. The problem is we get in these tunnels, these dogmatic tunnels, where we just hear what we want to hear. So we're not. But see the role of the university. My colleague Eric Kleinenberg wrote a terrific book about libraries as the commons in communities. And he's got some powerful sociological data on it. Well, think of the universities playing that role.
Absolutely.
I mean, it's not an accident that we are partnering with the library system to bring dialogue into the lives of seniors. The Brooklyn Public Library last year had 8 million visitors by people over the age of 65.
Wow.
Okay, this is going to be their feature. So I mean, this notion of opening up what we do is quite attractive, but we should not underestimate the amount of aggressive outreaches being done by campuses today.
John, I love the vision of hope that you're painting here, and that you also paint at the end of the book, right? I love that the book really wraps up with this vision of a hope for a future, which I think is such a lovely antidote to some of the bleak skepticism to which Eric was pointing us a little bit earlier. And so drawing on your own use of sort of religious metaphors, as it were, I wonder if you can offer us in our final minutes here a sort of benediction of sorts that is just as you end the book with this word of hope about the future at that point. Even though we are only a few years removed from when you published that book, we are in the midst of a very tumultuous time between the pandemic and political strife and racial injustice really coming to the fore. Can you update for us your word of hope for our present time as we close out our conversation here this afternoon?
Well, it's interesting that the young man who's now head of admissions and financial aid at Temple, who emailed me this morning, said the thing that he had brought with him most from his time at NYU was a sense of the sacrality of what we in colleges and universities do. I mean, we are the stewards and nurturers of thought. And all of us should remember that every time we're given the privilege of teaching or working to support the enterprise of a college or university. He, as an admissions officer at NYU, had been imbued with the fact that what he was doing was a worthy and useful life because it was advancing the enterprise of ecumenical thought. And you know, each of our schools is in a different place. Being educated by the Jesuits, 500 years ago, St. Ignatius said, if you're given the privilege of a classroom or a school or a university, think out its ratio studiorum. What is its purpose? You know, the business people would call it the value proposition, the differentiating principle, whatever it is. Use Latin words, it's better. Because, you know, it's like Otto says, don't use the word God. It's got too much, use numinous. Get rid of the baggage. But why is this worth Melanie's life? Why is this worth Eric's life? Why is this worth John's life? It's worth it because we have the chance to infect people, not with the allergy to nuance and complexity that is infecting our society, but with the antidote to that, which is genuine openness to a dialogic dialogue, which doesn't mean sacrificing to indifferentism or giving up your position. And the only other thing to close with a religious metaphor that became the human resources, it was funny. Lisa would always say to me, you know, honey, I know you think you have to because you have a PhD in religion, but nobody understands your religious metaphors, you know. She said, I'm an educated Jewish woman. I don't understand most of them. You talk about the 7 sacraments, the corporal works of mercy. I mean, this is not my stuff. But the human resource, they actually became something of that was incorporated by the security guards, by the cleaning folks at NYU. Embrace the affirmative doctrine of original sin. So, you know, original sin can be very liberating if you just read it to say, Melanie, I got news for you. with all the driving that went through, your education and your PhD from Princeton and the intensity with which you seek, you're not perfect and you ain't going to be in this life. So that's liberating. Oh, I don't have to be perfect. Now I just have to get better every day. Well, if you take that lesson and you incorporate it over to the institutional side of things and say, we don't have to it's the arc of justice, as Martin Luther King said. We don't have to get to perfection in 2021. We just got to make sure that 2021 sets up 2022 better than it started when it got it from 2020. And as the questioner said, given the nadir we hit, maybe we can make some real progress here. I just thank you very much for indulging me for this. It's a lot of fun, and good luck to all of you.
So John, thank you so much. And I strongly recommend the book to folks. And it for me, it very much encapsulates why I know my colleagues think of what we do as our calling, right? That there really is, I mean, I'm not even very religious, but I feel a spiritual dimension to this, right? Of what we do. For folks who joined us today, thank you for joining us. Please visit the SVHE website, svhe.org, and you can see other events that are happening this week at our mini winter meeting. I just want to point out two real quickly. We have a second Chats with Change Agents event on Friday at 2:30. Tracy Fessenden and John Carlson from the Center for the Study of Religion and Conflict at Arizona State University will be talking with Terry Shoemaker, who will be having a conversation with them. And then those of you who are SVHE folks or would just like to learn more about SVHE, you can do so at 3 o'clock on Thursday, followed by the town hall, our winter town hall meeting Thursday at 4 p.m. And all that information is available on the website. So John, thank you once again. And thanks for everybody who joined us today.
Thank you, Eric.
Thank you.